It is not uncommon at all for people to get a little disappointed in a psychedelic session, especially if they were looking for some sort of additional insights that didn't come. Usually it's because they didn't do the work, but I can't really blame people for that because they don't really know what doing the work means. So let's go ahead, let's get into it. Hi everybody, my name is Jill. Welcome back to the Journey Sage. And this is the channel that I wish had been around when I was going through my psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And I learned about doing the work kind of straight out of the gate. So for me, it's second nature. But after talking to folks, I realized that what I consider to be common sense is relatively new information to lots of folks. So let's get into the basics. What exactly is doing the work, and what's it mean when people talk about it in terms of psychedelic work? So it basically comes down to the three categories: preparation, journey engagement, and integration. And if you watched any videos on this channel, you know I talk about integration all the time. So again, let's get back to basics. When we're talking about preparation, it means that before your psychedelic journey, preferably a couple of weeks before, you want to start preparing. You want to start thinking about why you are engaging in this psychedelic experience. What are you looking to learn? What are you looking to get out of it? Usually it stems from some sort of problem that you're having in life. Maybe there's a relationship issue. Maybe there's an issue at work and you want to get a promotion, but things just don't seem to be happening. Maybe you have some internal feelings. You're like, this just doesn't feel good. Why am I scared all the time? Why am I questioning things all the time? Whatever it is that made you in the first place kind of book that psychedelic session, that's what you should be investigating. You should be journaling about it, trying to understand it more. The more that you prepare in that, the more that you focus on what you want to work on, the path during the psychedelic journey is going to be clearer. Think of it as like you're kind of getting ready to plant a garden. The actual planting or the sprouting of things is a psychedelic journey. You've got to kind of clear the soil and clean things up and do a little bit of fertilizer. You have to prepare. That's what you need to do with your psychedelic assisted session in some ways. Really think about what you are trying to understand. What are you seeking? You can be kind of goal-oriented if you want, whatever works for you. Meditation, journaling, exercising, get yourself in the mind space of being prepared for the journey. Secondly, engaging with the journey. And sometimes this is tough because depending on what substance you're using and depending on dosage, you want to be driving that car. You want to be navigating that journey so that as things come up in the journey, very often patterns, memories, you want to be engaging in that. You don't want to be shutting it down. Now look, it's not always a walk in the garden during these journeys, especially when you're trying to figure something out. You could be going back and feeling some really tough emotions and reliving some really bad memories. Those are the things that are holding you back. And the only way to work through them is to process them in your current adult mindset. Most of the time, these things are from childhood. So you need to engage with the journey. You don't want to be shutting it down just because it doesn't feel good, just because you're remembering things you don't want to remember. You have to stay engaged with the journey. And the same way, when we have to take medicine and it tastes horribly, or we have a medical procedure and we're kind of stuck not being able to do our normal things, we still have to engage in that healing process. You need to engage in that actual journey, even if sometimes it's bringing up some awful stuff. And trust me, I know what that's like. That's why it's work. It's not, easy sliding down a hill. It's trudging uphill, looking at some of this painful stuff and re-feeling it. And then the third part is the integration. That is where after the journey, especially the initial couple of days right after the journey, you are reflecting on what you learned. You're like, oh my gosh, is that really how my toddler self thought about that? Is that really how I thought about things? Is that really true, or is that a story? So you get to reflect on what was shown to you during the journey. And then secondly, you then need to apply it. There's a whole bunch of neuroscience around the time period after a psychedelic journey Basically, an opening in your psyche, the neuroplasticity, allows your brain to make new connections. So if you have discovered something in the reflections of your journey, you have to apply that. So if there's no reason to be scared of the universe because you realize it was just your dad beating you and the universe is not an awful place, then you need to start applying that mindset of, wait a minute, universe isn't a horrible, horrible place. Look at all these good things that have happened. Look what could happen. You have to actively apply a different way of thinking about things from what you have reflected upon from the journey. So let me give you a really, really solid example, okay? I was having some real concerns about connecting with folks. I've actually been single for over a year. I wanted to do some internal work, and I was getting a little concerned that I felt like I was challenged with connecting with people who were emotionally ready for relationships. I had been connecting with folks that were not ready. So I was like, what's going on with that? That was my preparation. My journey, engaging with that journey, oh my gosh, it was one of the most painful journeys because you know what happened? It took me back to when, after my mother had attempted suicide with a shotgun, she immediately went to the hospital. My father was helping her out. I was immediately kind of shunted to different relatives, none of whom were trauma informed. I can't even remember crying after having seen my mother on the bathroom floor. And during that journey, these awful feelings of, it's not even worth trying to connect with people. They disappoint you. You don't get what you need. And I remember getting up and running to the restroom, and one of the facilitators was there, and I just started crying. And I asked her if I could give her a hug, and she gave me this lovely, very maternal hug. And I came out of the hug and I was like, that wasn't that hard. Why was that so hard for my family? And I suddenly had a tremendous insight as to how my father must have grown up, because this happened to be his mother. If she couldn't even provide comfort or hugs or a shoulder to cry on for a child whose mother just tried to kill herself, then can you imagine how she was regularly? Whatever her trauma was, I mean, it must have been a doozy. So I suddenly realized, engaging in the journey, that these awful feelings of not being connected came from relatives who weren't able to connect from their perspective. And all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, now it makes sense why that little girl is so kind of hesitant. Now, applying that knowledge, it came out of the journey. It wasn't a great experience. It was incredibly insightful. The application is, wait a minute, look at all these other relationships with emotionally available people. I can connect to them just fine. And then it was like, oh, I get it. My toddler self, or my young 5-year-old self, learned that nobody's really going to be around. I'm always on my own. You can't rely on people. You have to deal with your own stuff. But in applying the knowledge of, wait a minute, that was their deficit, I can now look at my life and say, wait a minute, I can totally connect with people. Not everybody is like that. Lots of people will give free hugs, especially when there's a friend or a loved one in need. So that's a kind of full cycle example of doing the work and coming out of it on the other side saying, hey, wait, I've kind of healed a trauma point there. I really don't believe that the world is full of people who are emotionally detached. I have a lot of evidence to the contrary. It just happened to be what I grew up with. So that's basically it, folks. That's what doing the work is. Preparing for the journey, being engaged with the journey, and then applying what you learned during the journey. And if you follow that basic process, you'll have much more insight than you would if you just kind of said, oh, I just want the journey to show me something. So with that said, as always, if you want to hear more about my particular story of healing my PTSD from child abuse with MDMA, check out my books on Amazon. And as always, you can head over to thejourneysage.com for more information and more resources. Until next time, take care.